I think you are now ready. Ready to hear what happened 100 years ago.
Wait a minute. 100 years ago? That means... Oh no. So here's a funny detail that was brought to my attention by a user on my Discord server, Affleck McQuack. Side note, join my Discord if you haven't already, link will be in the description down below. But he realized that while Link was sleeping in the Chamber of Resurrection, 100 years have passed. Now normally that wouldn't really be that big of a deal, but there's one piece of lore in The Legend of Zelda that has huge repercussions, assuming that Nintendo didn't just forget about it. It's stated here in Hyrule Historia that every 100 years a new male Gerudo is born, and that Gerudo is set to become king. Now as far as the games have showed us, anytime there is a male Gerudo king, it's usually a reincarnation of Ganondorf. That doesn't completely rule out the possibility of a peaceful king of the Gerudo people, it's just that we've never actually seen it in the games. So that being said, with 100 years passing and Breath of the Wild 2 taking place directly after the first game, could it be that we see the birth of the next Gerudo king? Obviously at that point he wouldn't be, a threat since he'd be a newborn baby Gerudo, not exactly prime King of Evil material, but there are certainly ways Nintendo could use this piece of lore when crafting the story for Breath of the Wild 2. Perhaps the decomposing body of Ganondorf that we see in the catacombs of the castle could somehow seek out the newborn and corrupt his body and transform him immediately into a restored adult version of Ganondorf. It would essentially steal its life force and absorb it into itself to just be completely rejuvenated in that instance. Admittedly a cool idea, but it's also technically like killing a baby, and I'm not really sure if Nintendo's going to be on board with that one. So unless they really think of some more kid-friendly version of that idea, they might just go with something else. So the next logical step would be some sort of time skip or time travel mechanic, which might already work in this game. From the trailers, we've already seen time manipulation being one of the central mechanics for this game, so full-on time travel doesn't really seem all that far-fetched. Plus, let's be honest, the Zelda series really does love playing with time travel. We got Ocarina of Time, Skyward Sword, Age of Calamity, all of those, and even Twilight Princess to some extent, have some form of time travel in them, so I wouldn't even be surprised at this point if that's one of the routes they decide to go down. And I'm not saying that those are the only two solutions or Nintendo has to do it in one of these ways or even at all, honestly, but those are just two of the easiest solutions that I could come up with right off the top of my head. I'm sure the people behind The Legend of Zelda are a little more creative than I am in terms of making up fantasy stories, so I'll leave that for them to decide. However, I think this is a really interesting idea and one that I would actually like to see in some way. Even if it does end up being like an Easter egg type thing at the end of the game where maybe we see some random Gerudo give birth and they name the child Ganondorf. It'd be like a neat little way to set up the next game while also being like an oh crap moment for a lot of players who are familiar with the lore. Also, this is unrelated, but do you ever just wonder why people in Hyrule don't just like ban the names Link, Zelda, and Ganondorf? Like they have to realize by now, if there's someone named Link and Zelda born around the same time, some bad stuff is gonna happen. Anyway, is this a cool idea that I'd like to see in the sequel of Breath of the Wild? Heck yes. It's something that we haven't really ever witnessed in the Legend of Zelda series so far, and we really only know about it from the lore. That being said, there are some issues that I could see being reasons as to why Nintendo wouldn't go down this route. First and foremost, is Ganondorf actually dead? I mean, last time I checked, dead people aren't moving around, and for a dead guy, Ganondorf does seem to have a lot of energy. Now initially I was thinking, okay, so maybe after 100 years of being dormant, he is finally reincarnating, and that's how they're going to stay consistent with the 100-year lore. By giving Ganondorf this type of rebirth, if you will, causing his normal Gerudo body to be restored, and thus he's technically reborn as a newer Ganondorf. That's another solution that could work, but then I remembered about this line in Breath of the Wild.
Ganon was born out of a dark past. He is a pure embodiment of the ancient evil that is reborn time and time again. He has given up on reincarnation and assumed his pure, enraged form. If set free upon our world, the destruction will be unlike anything ever seen before.
So if Calamity Ganon has given up on reincarnation, what's going on with Ganondorf's body then? Unfortunately, I really don't have a good answer. One possibility is that he just sort of changed his mind. I suppose there's really nothing stopping from Calamity Ganon from just choosing to reincarnate after he failed in Breath of the Wild. It's not like Zelda's sealing power can stop the cycle, since we've seen that same type of thing happen in Ocarina of Time. Zelda seals Ganon away in the Sacred Realm, but he eventually comes back, so there's a limit on how long that sealing power can last. I think this theory, while possible, would be kind of a cheap cop-out. It would just be retconning something that was explicitly stated in the first game, and they did sort of make a big deal out of that giving up on reincarnation line, so it would be really strange to me if they just sort of went back on what they said. I think it's also important to look at the wording here as well. I looked through Hyrule Historia and the Zelda Encyclopedia, and I found 3 references to this piece of Gerudo lore. All of them basically say the same thing we've been assuming. Traditionally, one male is born every 100 years, and that male is destined to become king. However, I do find it odd that they use words like their customs or traditions, because that implies the fact that Gerudo only have one male every 100 years is less biological and more of a cultural thing. To me, that doesn't read like it's a matter of fact, but rather due to this arbitrary decree that only one male is allowed to live in every 100 years. Of course, it also implies the Gerudo kill off all their other male offspring, assuming they don't meet the requirements of being born once every 100 years. Another answer is perhaps as part of the curse of the cycle, the Gerudo people are physically unable to have any male offspring if Ganondorf exists in any form still. So essentially just 100 years after the last male Gerudo dies. The wording is just ambiguous enough to allow for that possibility as well. We're also making another pretty big assumption by assuming these Gerudo kings must all be incarnations of Ganondorf and are always destined to be evil. The lore doesn't really make this clear, but there certainly could be the possibility of a male Gerudo king who is actually neutral and kind of the kingdom of Hyrule. I mean, look at Breath of the Wild. You have Gerudo leaders like Urbosa and Riju who are both leaders of the Gerudo, yet they pledge loyalty to the kingdom of Hyrule to the point where they're fighting alongside Link to stop Calamity Ganon, who is another Gerudo that just happens to be evil. That's not even the only game in which the Gerudo are a neutral faction, because in Four Swords Adventures, we can see the Gerudo people again denouncing Ganon as their leader and aiming to restore a peaceful dialogue between the two people. So it's entirely possible that a male Gerudo king could indeed form a positive relationship with the rest of Hyrule, despite the fact that we've never actually witnessed that in-game as of yet. Either way, I have to believe that the 100 years that Nintendo chose for the time that Link was in the Chamber of Resurrection has to be somewhat deliberate. The more and more I think about it, the more I realize they must have had a sequel planned from the very start, and it just seems to make more and more sense. Otherwise, they could have picked any other amount of time, so why pick 100 if not because it perfectly lines up with another piece of already established lore? Even if this entire thing amounts to nothing, I'm still really excited to see what kind of story Breath of the Wild 2 is cooking up for us. But what do you guys think? Do you think we could see the reincarnation of Ganondorf now that it's been 100 years since the Great Calamity? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. This has been sort of a fun theory experiment that my Discord and I have been talking about over the past day or so shout out to everyone there. Again, if you want to join the community, I'll leave a link in the description down below. But I think that's where I'm going to end off this video. So if you guys enjoyed it, a like rating would be greatly appreciated. If you want to see more, consider subscribing. But once again, guys, my name is Matt. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.